November 18th, 1944. 3:47 a.m. The forest was dying. Not from fire or artillery, though both had tried. The Hurtgen was dying from something quieter, more patient. It died one man at a time in the mud between the blackened trees in the frost that turned corpses into monuments in the silence that followed muzzle flash. Elias Brennan understood silence. He lay in that silence now, 60 yards from a German sentry who would be dead in 30 seconds and didn't know it yet. The rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving the November air clean and cold enough to burn the lungs. Good. Rain muffled sound, but it also muffled vision, and Eli needed to see. The German was young, maybe 19. He stood in front of a sandbagged position, shoulders hunched against the cold rifle, slung hands cupped around a match trying to light a cigarette. The orange flare illuminated a face that could have been from Kansas or Kentucky. Tired and scared, and so far from home it probably hurt to think about. Eli's Springfield rifle looked wrong. The barrel ended in something that didn't belong there, a cylindrical metal can, 6 inches long, painted flat black. The kind of thing you'd find under a truck, not screwed onto a weapon designed to kill men at 300 yards. But there it was, an oil filter from a 2.5-ton deuce threaded carefully onto the muzzle of a 30-06 rifle held in place by welds that had taken 3 nights to perfect. It looked ridiculous, like something a child would build playing war in a garage. The German got his cigarette lit. He took a long drag, the kind of pull a man takes when he's trying to extract more than nicotine, trying to pull comfort out of burning tobacco, because comfort is the one thing this forest will not provide. Smoke curled up into the darkness. He started to turn to walk his patrol route to move back toward the bunker, where 3 more Germans sat around a kerosene heater drinking ersatz coffee and pretending they weren't terrified. Eli settled the wire stock against his shoulder. The oil filter made the rifle front heavy, pulled the muzzle down, forced him to adjust his hold. He couldn't use the iron sights because the filter blocked them completely. He aimed by instinct, by the weight of the weapon, by the thousands of rounds he'd fired in his father's garage, back when the world made sense, and the only thing that mattered was whether you could hit a tin can at 50 yards. His finger found the trigger, found the resistance point, found the place where metal met metal and intention became action. He squeezed. The Springfield's bolt slammed forward with its characteristic mechanical violence. 70 grains of powder ignited behind a 150-grain bullet. Gas expanded. Physics happened. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, carrying all the kinetic energy needed to punch through bone and tissue, and the thin hope that standing in a forest in Germany might somehow lead to standing in a kitchen in Hamburg with a wife who still loved you. But the sound was wrong. Instead of the sharp crack that had announced American presence in this forest for 3 weeks, instead of the thunder that turned invisible men into targets, there was only a heavy mechanical cough, a pneumatic thud, followed by a sharp hiss of escaping gas. The oil filter absorbed the muzzle blast. The baffles inside trapped the expanding gases. The cotton packing compressed so tight it felt like stone, soaked up the heat and the fury and the violence. It sounded like a book falling on carpet. 60 yards away, the German sentry didn't hear a gunshot. He felt a sledgehammer hit him in the chest. The bullet, unaffected by the suppressor, undiminished in its purpose, punched through his wool coat, through his ribs, through the muscle that had carried him through training and across France and into this forest where American snipers killed men in the dark. He dropped his cigarette. He dropped to his knees. He fell forward onto the wet leaves without making a sound louder than the rain that had stopped an hour ago. Nobody shouted. Nobody fired. Nobody woke. The forest kept dying quietly. Eli worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected with a brass clink that seemed loud as thunder in his ears, but was nothing, just metal on metal, just the sound of a mechanism doing what it was built to do. He chambered a new round. The oil filter was already hot heat radiating through the improvised suppressor paint, starting to bubble cotton, beginning to char. But it worked. A 35-cent oil filter from a truck had just done what the United States Army said was impossible. It had killed a man without announcing the killing. It had turned a rifle into a whisper. Eli breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way his father had taught him. Control the breath, control the body, control the shot. The way Callum Brennan had stood in a garage in West Virginia and taught a 14-year-old boy that precision mattered, that craftsmanship saved lives, that the difference between good equipment and bad equipment was the difference between men coming home and mothers crying at funerals. The German's body lay where it had fallen. In 3 hours, when dawn came and the relief crew arrived, they would find him and think he'd had a heart attack or collapsed from exhaustion. They would not think American sniper. They would not think silent death in the darkness. They would not scan the tree line looking for muzzle flash that never came. Text appeared in Eli's mind the way memory works in the space between heartbeats, white letters on black background, the kind of thing that would make sense on a screen but existed only in the strange clarity that combat brings. Over the next 6 nights, this 35-cent oil filter would account for 94 German deaths. But Eli didn't know that yet. All he knew was that the first one worked. The technique functioned. The innovation held. He crawled backward through the mud, moving with the patience of a man who understood that speed kills the hasty and silence saves the careful. The oil filter caught on a branch. He stopped. Freed, it gently kept moving. 50 yards back from the German line. 100. 200. Only then did he rise to a crouch and start the long walk back to American positions, carrying a rifle that looked like garage trash and felt like vindication. Charleston, West Virginia. March 1938. The mine whistle blew at 4:15 in the afternoon, which was wrong because the mine whistle only blew at shift change or when something had gone wrong in a way that couldn't be fixed quietly. Elias Brennan was 24 years old, up to his elbows in the guts of a Chevrolet flatbed that had thrown a rod when he heard that whistle. He stood in his father's garage, a corrugated metal building that smelled like oil and sawdust, and the particular optimism of men who believed anything could be fixed if you had the right tools and enough time. The whistle kept blowing. Eli stepped out into the March afternoon, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that was older than he was stained with a decade of mechanical problems solved and machines brought back from the edge of uselessness. Down the gravel road that ran through Charleston, population 943 other men were stepping out of other buildings, all looking toward the mine entrance 2 miles south, all hearing the same whistle, all knowing what it meant when the whistle didn't stop. His father's pickup was parked by the garage. Callum Brennan had taken it to the mine at 5 that morning, picking up extra work because money was tight and the garage alone wasn't feeding 2 people anymore. The Depression had its teeth in West Virginia the way a dog has its teeth in meat. Callum took shifts underground when the mine foreman needed extra hands. One day, 8 hours come back up, collect pay, keep the garage running. Easy money, he'd said that morning. I'll be home for dinner. The sheriff's car came up the road at 4:30, moving slow, not rushing. When a lawman doesn't rush, it means the emergency is over, and what's left is just the administrative work of tragedy. Eli watched that car come up the gravel drive. Watched Sheriff Hawkins get out hat in hand, the way men hold hats when they're about to say something that can't be unsaid. The sheriff was 50, had known Callum Brennan for 30 years, had bought his last 3 vehicles from this garage, and he looked like a man who'd aged a decade in the last hour. There's been an accident, he said. Eli heard the words, but they didn't connect. Accidents were things you fixed, carburetors that seized, transmissions that failed. You diagnosed the problem, found the broken part replaced. It sent the machine back into the world working better than it had before. The ventilation system failed in shaft 7, Hawkins said. Methane built up. Someone struck a spark. Still just words, just information. Just data that would make sense if Eli had time to think about it, to process it, to understand what methane and sparks meant when they happened in an enclosed space 300 feet underground, where 17 men were trying to extract coal from the earth so that other men in other places could have heat and light and the basic comfort of not freezing to death in winter. 17 men, the sheriff said. Your father, Owen Hartley's father. I'm sorry, Eli. I'm so goddamn sorry. The world tilted. Not metaphorically. Actually tilted the way vision tilts when blood pressure drops and the brain stops getting oxygen and the body forgets how to stand. Eli sat down on the running board of the Chevrolet he'd been fixing, the one Callum would never finish. The one that would sit in this garage until Eli sold it for parts or fixed it himself or just let it rust into the ground, because what was the point of fixing trucks when your father was dead in a mine because the company that owned that mine had cut costs on ventilation systems? 3 days later, Eli stood at his father's grave and listened to a preacher talk about God's plan. The cemetery was full. 17 graves, all fresh, all dug in the same day, because Charleston didn't have enough gravediggers to spread the work out. The coal company paid for simple markers, limestone with names and dates. The company representative stood in the back uncomfortable in a suit that cost more than most of the mourners made in a year. The investigation took 2 weeks and concluded what everyone already knew. The company had deferred maintenance, had ignored complaints, had prioritized shareholder value over the lives of men who went underground so that other men could profit from what they brought up. Nobody went to jail. Nobody lost their license. The widows received settlements that barely covered funeral costs. Maeve Hartley, who'd lost her husband in the same explosion that killed Callum, received $400, and the understanding that she'd be raising 6 children alone on whatever charity the town could spare. Eli inherited the garage and a lesson that would calcify into conviction: bad equipment kills men. Good equipment saves lives. If the people in charge won't provide good equipment, somebody else has to build it. He kept the garage running, fixed tractors for farmers who paid in eggs and vegetables, repaired trucks for the coal company, even though it burned him every time to take their money, to know that the profit from his labor went into the same pockets that had decided his father's life wasn't worth the cost of maintaining a ventilation system. 4 years. 4 years of keeping Callum's reputation alive, of being the son who honored his father by doing the work the way his father had taught him. Precision, craftsmanship. Never give up on a problem just because the solution isn't obvious. In 1941, he married Nora Parker. Schoolteacher from 2 towns over, 26 years old, dark hair, and the kind of stubborn kindness that saw past the grease under Eli's fingernails to the decency underneath. They were married in October, had 4 months of normal life, 4 months of coming home to a warm house and a wife who smiled when he walked through the door. Then December 7th happened, and normal life became a thing that used to exist. Pearl Harbor turned the whole country into a different version of itself. Eli enlisted in June 1942, brought along his neighbor Owen Hartley, whose mother Maeve was a widow from the same mine collapse that killed Callum. Owen was 20 years old, youngest of 6 kids, Maeve's last hope and last worry. When Eli came by to tell her he was enlisting and Owen wanted to go too, she was sitting on her porch mending clothes by lamplight, trying to make threadbare fabric last another season because buying new wasn't possible on a coal company pension that had been calculated to be exactly enough to keep a family alive and not $1 more. She looked at Eli with eyes that had already buried a husband and couldn't bear to bury a son. "Bring my boy home," she said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. "Elias Brennan, you bring Owen home." Owen stood there grinning like this was all a grand adventure, like war was something exciting that happened in newspapers and radio broadcasts, not something that turned boys into corpses in forests they'd never heard of. "I already lost his father," Maeve said. "I can't lose Owen." Eli thought about his own father, about promises kept and broken, about the weight of responsibility that comes from being the one who survives when other men die. He made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep standing on that porch in the summer of 1942, with Owen grinning and Maeve crying, and the whole terrible momentum of history pulling them toward a future none of them could see. "I promise, Mom. On my father's grave, I'll bring Owen home." That promise had seemed possible in the sunshine of a West Virginia summer. It seemed harder in a forest in Germany with German snipers killing 4 Americans a day and orders coming down from officers who'd never seen combat but had very strong opinions about proper procedure. Hurtgen Forest, November 1944. The forest was a meat grinder. That's what the men called it. Not officially. Officers didn't like that kind of talk. It was bad for morale, they said, as if pretending the Hurtgen wasn't devouring the 28th Infantry Division would somehow make it less true. 33,000 American casualties in a forest that stretched 12 miles in terrain that negated every advantage the American army possessed. Tanks couldn't maneuver in the dense trees. Artillery couldn't target what it couldn't see. Air support couldn't bomb what was hidden under triple canopy. What worked in the Hurtgen was small unit tactics, infantry fighting infantrymen with rifles, killing other men with rifles, and whoever saw first lived while the other died. The Germans saw first. Elias Brennan arrived in the Hurtgen in early November as part of the 28th Infantry Division's support company. He was a sergeant by virtue of being 30 years old and knowing more about engines than anyone else in the unit. He ran the motor pool kept vehicles running despite mud and cold and the general chaos of trying to fight a war in a forest designed by God to kill soldiers. Nobody wrote home about the men who changed oil and replaced spark plugs. But armies move on wheels, and wheels need mechanics. Owen had come through Normandy without a scratch. 22 years old, still grinning, still treating the war like an adventure that would eventually end with him going home to marry the girl who wrote him letters twice a week. He'd been assigned to a rifle company, saw combat, earned his combat infantryman badge, came back from patrols with the kind of stories that seemed exciting, until you noticed his hands shook when he told them. November 14th. Owen's patrol got hit. Not by artillery, not by machine gun, by a sniper nobody saw. The round came out of nowhere, missed Owen's head by 3 inches, carved a groove across his helmet that left his ears ringing for 2 days. The man behind him, a private from Ohio named Martinez, took the next round through the throat and died before the medic could reach him. That was kill number 18 for the German sniper operating in the 28th Division's sector. Intelligence knew because they'd been counting, Because 18 dead Americans in 5 days meant there was someone out there who was very good at their job and very dedicated to it. The division couldn't find him. Patrols went out, counter-sniper teams tried to set up. Nothing worked. The German fired from different positions, never stayed in one place long enough to be triangulated, understood the forest better than men who'd been fighting in it for weeks. November 17th. The count reached 23. 23 Americans dead from a single rifle. Martinez, Rodriguez, Williams, Jefferson, Kowalski. Names that would go in casualty reports, bodies that would go in graves, mothers who would get telegrams that started with, "The Secretary of War regrets to inform you." Colonel Marcus Webb called Eli into his office on the evening of November 17th. Webb was 48 West Point career officer who believed in regulations until regulations got his men killed, at which point he believed in results. "Sergeant Brennan, we have a problem." "Yes, sir. German sniper in our sector. 23 confirmed kills in 5 days. We can't find him. Can't kill him. Can't stop him." Webb looked at Eli with the kind of tired frustration that comes from sending men into a forest and getting back corpses. "Your motor pool is in the rear. You've got tools, materials, time to think. I need you to think about this problem. Sir, I'm a mechanic, not infantry. You're a man who fixes things that are broken. This situation is broken. Fix it." How Sir Webb leaned back in his chair. "I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. Standard tactics aren't working. Maybe non-standard tactics will. You have full access to any equipment you need. Just stop this bastard before I lose another man." Eli left that meeting thinking about oil and engines and the way sound works when you give it somewhere to go besides straight into the air. He'd been working on a deuce and a half that afternoon replacing an oil filter, and something about the cylindrical shape, the baffles inside, the way it trapped and absorbed had stuck in his mind. An engine is a controlled explosion. Fuel burns gas, expands, drives a piston. The exhaust that comes out is hot and loud and violent. A muffler works by trapping that exhaust, letting it expand slowly, cooling it, breaking up the pressure wave. A rifle is also a controlled explosion. Powder burns gas, expands, drives a bullet. The exhaust that comes out is hot and loud and violent. Eli walked to the scrap pile behind the motor pool. Every military installation has a mountain of broken equipment too damaged to fix, but too valuable to completely discard. He dug through twisted metal and cracked engine blocks until he found what he was looking for. A used oil filter from a 2.5-ton truck. 6 inches long, 4 inches in diameter, the outside dented and paint flaking, but the internals intact. Mesh baffles in decent shape. Cotton packing compressed and oil soaked, but still there, still functional. He carried it back to his workbench and spent the next 3 days building something that would either revolutionize warfare or blow up in his face. The test. November 17th. The firing range was just a clearing behind the motor pool, some wooden posts set up as targets, the kind of place soldiers went to zero their rifles or blow off steam by shooting at nothing in particular. Eli arrived at dawn carrying his M1903 Springfield and the oil filter he'd spent 3 days modifying. He'd welded a threaded ring to the back of the filter, matching the threads he'd carefully cut into the barrel crown. 3 layers of weld, each one tested under hydraulic pressure. The cotton packing inside compressed so tight it barely had room to shift. The mesh baffles secured with steel rods bolted through the canister body. It looked absurd. A rifle barrel ending in a truck part. The kind of thing that would make sense in a junkyard, not on a weapon. He should have tested it alone. Should have kept it quiet, proved the concept before going public. But part of him, the part that had learned craftsmanship from Callum Brennan, wanted witnesses. Wanted to prove that a mechanic could solve problems that engineers said were impossible. By the time he set up at the firing line, a dozen men had gathered. Officers and enlisted, all looking at the contraption in Eli's hands with expressions ranging from curiosity to open contempt. Lieutenant Graham Foster was there, ordnance officer. 28 years old, believed in regulations and procedure and equipment designed by trained engineers in proper facilities. He looked at the oil filter and actually laughed. "Sergeant Brennan, is that a truck part on your rifle?" "Yes, sir. Oil filter from a deuce and a half. And you think this will work?" "Only one way to find out, sir." Foster's voice carried the condescension of a man who'd been to the right schools and learned the right answers. "You're going to blow your own hand off. The pressure from the muzzle blast will rupture that canister and turn it into a fragmentation grenade. Sergeant, this is why we have engineers, so mechanics don't kill themselves trying to reinvent ballistics." The other officers laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly, just the amusement of educated men watching someone who didn't know better attempt something obviously doomed. Eli ignored them. He walked to the firing line, aimed at a wooden post 50 yards down range. The oil filter made the rifle muzzle heavy. He couldn't see the iron sights, had to aim by instinct, by feel, by the accumulated experience of 1,000 rounds fired in a garage in West Virginia. He took a breath, settled the stock, focused on the center of the target, and squeezed the trigger. The Springfield fired, the bolt slammed forward. The oil filter did exactly what cheap welds and insufficient preparation guaranteed it would do. It ruptured. The canister split along one side with a sharp metallic crack. Hot gas vented through the rupture with a sound like a firecracker. The whole assembly blew apart, pieces of metal spinning off into the dirt, the shot deafening as loud as any unsilenced rifle. The wooden post downrange didn't even get hit. The rupturing filter threw off his aim completely. The officers erupted in laughter. Foster was holding his sides, tears streaming down his face. "I told you," he gasped. "I told you it would explode. You're lucky you still have a hand, Sergeant. Lucky you didn't kill someone." Colonel Webb stepped forward from the crowd of officers. His face was unreadable. He picked up the ruptured filter, examined the split seam, the failed welds, the evidence of good intention and poor execution. Set it down carefully. "Sergeant Brennan, this is exactly why we have regulations. You could have been killed, could have injured others standing nearby." He looked at the assembled officers, his voice hardening. "This demonstration proves that improvised weapons modification is dangerous and unpredictable." His gaze returned to Eli. "I'm ordering you to cease all work on this device immediately. Remove any modifications from your rifle. Return to your assigned motor pool duties. That's a direct order." "Am I clear?" Eli stood at attention, feeling the weight of failure and humiliation. "Crystal clear, sir." "Good." Webb turned to leave, then paused. "And Sergeant, if I hear you've continued this project despite my order, there will be a court-martial. We don't need dead heroes making the situation worse. We need living mechanics doing their jobs." "Yes, sir." The officers dispersed most, still chuckling. Foster lingered long enough to add insult to injury. "Told you it wouldn't work, Sergeant. Maybe next time you'll leave the engineering to people who actually know what they're doing." When they were gone, Owen approached carefully. He'd watched from a distance, seen the whole humiliating spectacle. "You're going to stop right." Eli unscrewed the ruined filter from the barrel. The metal was still hot, the welds blackened and split. He wrapped it in an oily rag, tucked it into his pack. Didn't answer. "Eli." Owen's voice carried warning and worry in equal measure. "You just got a direct order from the colonel. He told you to stop. I heard him." And Eli looked at his friend. Thought about Maeve on her porch, eyes full of tears and trust. Thought about 3 Americans dead in a forest because their weapons were too loud. Thought about the promise he'd made on his father's grave. "I heard him tell me not to build it. I didn't hear him say I can't fix what's broken. That's not what he meant, and you know it. That's disobedience. That's keeping my word." Eli shouldered his rifle. "I'll rebuild it. Better welds, tighter packing, proper reinforcement, and I won't tell anyone until it works. You could be court-martialed. They'll throw you in Leavenworth. Better that than standing at your grave knowing I could have saved you but didn't because I followed orders." Owen stared at him. "Eli, this isn't rational." "No, it's not." Eli started walking back toward the motor pool. But rational men died in that mine because the company made rational decisions about cost versus safety. Rational doesn't always mean right. 3 nights of welding. Eli spent the next 3 nights rebuilding what the officers had called impossible. Working after everyone else, slept in a corner of the motor pool with just a lantern for light and the knowledge that discovery meant prison. The letter from Nora sat on his workbench arrived that afternoon. Her careful handwriting telling him about Charleston, about the garage Mr. Patterson was managing, about the baby she could feel moving now, about how the doctor said everything looked good for a June delivery. June. 7 months away. 7 months of needing to stay alive, of needing to keep Owen alive, of needing to make sure his child had a father and Maeve's child had a son. He found another oil filter, this one in better condition, less corrosion, cleaner internals. Studied the failure points from the first attempt. The welds had been too weak, single pass, inadequate for the pressures involved. The cotton packing hadn't been compressed enough. The baffles had relied on friction instead of mechanical fixation. This time he did it right. 3 layers of weld on every joint. Slow work, careful work, building up metal until the seams were twice as thick as the original design. He knew from fixing exhaust systems that welds needed to handle repeated thermal cycling, needed to flex without failing, needed to be stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. He pulled the cotton packing out, laid it in the sun for a day to dry completely, then recompressed it, using a hydraulic press in the motor pool, squeezing it down until it felt like stone, until there was no air left between the fibers to allow expansion. The baffles he secured with steel rods drilling through the canister body, threading the rods through the mesh, bolting them tight on both ends. The baffles wouldn't move now, couldn't shift under pressure, would do their job of breaking up the gas flow, or they'd stay in place trying. When he finished 3 days later, the filter weighed 3 pounds. Heavy, awkward. It made the Springfield front heavy, pulled the muzzle down, required strength to hold steady, but it felt solid, felt strong, felt like it might actually survive being fired. On the morning of November 18th, before dawn, before anyone else was awake, before he could talk himself out of it, Eli took the rebuilt suppressor to the firing range, alone this time. No witnesses, no officers, no one to laugh if it failed again. He screwed the filter onto the barrel carefully, felt its seat against the threads, tightened it until metal met metal with resistance that said it wasn't going anywhere. Loaded a 5-round magazine, 5 chances to prove the concept or prove the critics right. Took aim at the same wooden post that had survived his first attempt. The moment of truth. He squeezed the trigger. The Springfield lurched in his hands. The bolt cycled with its mechanical violence, but the sound was everything he'd hoped for and barely believed possible. Not the sharp crack that got men killed, not the thunder that announced positions. Just a heavy mechanical cough, a pneumatic exhalation, the kind of sound that might be a truck backfiring 3 blocks away or a door slamming in the wind. The oil filter absorbed the muzzle blast. The 3 layers of weld held. The compressed cotton soaked up the heat. The bolted baffles broke the pressure wave into harmless turbulence. Downrange splinters flew from the wooden post, direct hit. Eli stood there, hardly daring to breathe. He fired again. Same result. The rifle whispered instead of shouting, made killing conversational instead of dramatic. He fired 3 more rounds. The filter got hot smoke rising from the vents he'd drilled in the sides. Paint bubbled, metal expanded, but the welds held, the structure held, the impossible held. It worked. Owen appeared at his elbow, making him jump. Eli hadn't heard him approach, hadn't been aware of anything except the rifle and the target and the mathematics of success. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." Owen stared at the smoking filter. "Long enough to see that it works." "Yeah." Eli couldn't keep the satisfaction out of his voice. "It works. You disobeyed a direct order. I fixed a problem." "Eli." Owen grabbed his shoulder, forced eye contact. "Webb will court-martial you if he finds out. You know that, right? Only if I fail." Eli unscrewed the filter, let it cool, examined the welds. Still intact, still solid. "If I succeed, if this saves American lives, Webb will have to acknowledge that results matter more than regulations." "That's a hell of a gamble." "It's not a gamble. It's a certainty." Eli wrapped the filter in canvas. 23 men are dead. More dying every day. Standard equipment isn't working. This works. The math isn't complicated. What do you need from me, time? Silence. And trust that I'm doing this for the right reasons. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You've got all 3. Just don't get yourself killed being stubborn. Stubbornness runs in the family." Confronting the colonel. Eli stopped halfway to headquarters. The rifle felt heavy. The decision heavier. What he was about to do violated a direct order from his commanding officer. Courts-martial had been convened for less. Owen caught up to him outside the operations tent. "You're really doing this, I have to." Webb banned it, explicitly. "You show up with that thing, he'll have you arrested." Eli looked at the oil filter wrapped in canvas. Then he made a decision. Unscrewed it from the barrel, wrapped it separately, put it deep in his pack where it couldn't be seen. "What are you doing?" "Showing him the rifle first. Not showing him the filter. Not yet. That's still disobedience. That's keeping options open." Eli checked the barrel threads, made sure they were clean. "If he says yes to the concept, I show him the device. If he says no, I use it anyway and deal with the consequences. The consequences are Leavenworth. Only if it fails. If it works, if it saves lives, Webb will have to weigh results against regulations. And I'm betting he values dead Germans more than military protocol. That's one hell of a bet. It's the only bet that matters." Eli started walking again. "Owen, if I don't do this, you might die. Martinez died. Williams died. 23 Americans died because our rifles are too loud. I can fix that. I have fixed that. And I'll be damned if I let you die because I was too scared to break a rule." They reached the headquarters tent. Eli took a breath, steeling himself for what came next. "If this goes wrong, tell Nora I love her. It won't go wrong." Owen gripped his shoulder. "But yeah, I'll tell her." Colonel Webb's office. 0830 hours. The headquarters tent smelled like canvas and coffee and the particular tension of men making decisions that would get other men killed. Colonel Marcus Webb sat behind a field desk covered in maps and casualty reports, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past 5 days. "Sergeant Brennan." Webb didn't look up from the map. I thought I gave you an order to cease work on that weapon modification. You did, sir. Eli stood at attention, the rifle held at present arms. Standard Springfield, no visible modifications. Webb looked up now. His eyes were tired, but sharp. And yet here you are, against orders. I should have you arrested right now. Yes, sir. Give me one reason why I shouldn't. Because 23 Americans are dead, sir. Because the count goes up every day. Because I made a promise to bring my friend home alive, and I intend to keep it. Promises don't override military discipline. Eli set the rifle on the desk carefully. No, sir. But results do. And I have something that will get results. Webb stared at the rifle. It looks standard. It is, sir. Right now. Eli pulled the wrapped filter from his pack, set it on the desk between them like evidence in a trial. After you ordered me to stop, I continued anyway. Built a refined version. Tested it this morning. It works. The colonel's jaw tightened. You understand, I could have you court-martialed for this. Direct violation of a lawful order. Insubordination. Yes, sir. I understand completely. Then why would you risk it? Because you told me to fix the sniper problem, sir. You said standard tactics weren't working. You said you needed non-standard solutions. Eli unwrapped the filter. This is that solution. I just had to disobey you to build it. Webb picked up the filter, examined the triple welds, the bolt reinforcements, the evidence of careful engineering. This is different from the one that exploded. 3 times stronger welds, compressed cotton packing, bolted baffles. I fixed everything that failed the first time. You tested it. 15 rounds. 0 malfunctions. Sound reduction approximately 70%. Makes it possible to fire without revealing position. The colonel was silent for a long moment. Outside, the sounds of the camp filtered in. Engines running. Men preparing for another day of dying in a forest that didn't care about courage or cowardice, just about who saw who first. Finally, Webb spoke. Sergeant, what you've done is insubordination. By every regulation in the manual, I should convene a court-martial immediately. Have you arrested? Make an example. He paused. Set the filter down. But I'm not going to do that. You know why, no, sir? Because you're right. 23 dead Americans matters more than my ego. Results matter more than regulations. If this device works in combat, if it saves lives, then I don't care that you disobeyed me to build it. Webb leaned forward. But Brennan, hear me clearly. You use this at your own risk. No official authorization. No support if it fails. You're operating outside military protocol. If something goes wrong, if this thing malfunctions and kills you or anyone else, this conversation never happened. Understood. Understood, sir. You work alone. You don't involve other soldiers. You conduct operations only at night, only against verified German positions. You report kills to intelligence, but you don't discuss methodology. Clear crystal, sir. And one more thing. Webb's voice went hard as iron. If you ever disobey another direct order for any reason, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of this war in a cell. I'm giving you latitude because the situation is desperate. Don't mistake latitude for permission to ignore all authority. I won't, sir. Good. Webb stood. Now get out there and kill that German bastard. And Brennan, be careful. We can't afford to lose our only mechanic who thinks like an engineer. Night 1, November 18th, 03:30 hours. The forest at night was a country of its own. Not Germany, not America. Some third place where normal rules suspended and only physics and fear remained constant. Eli moved through it alone, carrying the Springfield with its impossible modification, carrying 5 loaded magazines, and the knowledge that the next 6 hours would prove Webb right, or prove everyone else right. He'd studied the pattern. 24 Americans dead in 6 days meant the German sniper was using a corridor about 400 yards from American lines, a gap where the trees thinned and movement became possible. The sniper had to return to German positions eventually, had to sleep, had to eat, had to cross ground that could be watched. Eli positioned himself overlooking that corridor at 3:30 in the morning, 2 hours before dawn, in a hide he'd prepared the previous afternoon. Just a depression in the ground covered with fallen branches offering concealment and a clear field of fire. The oil filter was screwed tight to his barrel. He'd brought 2 spares in his pack. Each filter was good for about 50 rounds before the cotton burned out. 50 rounds was 49 more than he needed if the theory was correct. He waited, breathing slowly, keeping his heart rate down. The cold seeped through his uniform, but he didn't move. Movement meant visibility, meant death. At 3:47, the first German appeared. Just a shape moving through the darkness, hunched against the cold, rifle slung, not expecting contact because this was German territory, safe ground where soldiers went when the killing was done. The German stopped to light a cigarette. The match flared orange, illuminated a young face, 19, maybe 20, tired, human. Eli settled the scope, controlled his breathing, squeezed. The rifle whispered its deadly truth. The German's cigarette fell from nerveless fingers. He collapsed without a sound louder than wind through branches. Nobody shouted. Nobody returned fire. Nobody knew. At 4:15, 2 more Germans came through the corridor, moving together, talking in low voices, relaxed. Men heading home after a shift. Eli took them both. 2 shots, 2 bodies. The forest stayed silent. At 5:32, movement again. Different this time. A man moving with controlled precision, scanning his surroundings, carrying his rifle ready. Professional. Dangerous. Possibly the sniper. Eli tracked him through the scope. 80 yards. The shot was harder. Moving target. Longer range. Wind picking up as dawn approached. He led the target. Accounted for movement. Accounted for drop. Fired. The German stumbled, caught himself, spun toward where the shot had come from, rifle coming up, impressive reaction time. But there was no muzzle flash to target. The oil filter had eaten it. And while the German was processing that impossibility, Eli's second round took him in the chest and dropped him. 4 bodies. Dawn approaching. Eli waited until full light, watching to see if anyone came looking. No one did. The Germans would find their missing men eventually, but for now they were just absent from roll call, lost, maybe deserted. Maybe dead from something other than American rifles, because American rifles were loud and no one had heard shots. He crawled backward out of his hide, moved slowly. Took an hour to cover 200 yards back to American lines. The oil filter was hot, but intact. Paint scorched. Cotton inside partially burned. But the welds held. It had done exactly what he'd built it to do. Colonel Webb found him by the coffee pot at 0700. Intelligence reports 4 German bodies discovered in Sector Baker. All shot, all in the corridor we discussed. His voice was neutral, but his eyes showed satisfaction. You know anything about that, Sergeant? I was in position overlooking that area from 0330 to 0600, sir. 4 confirmed kills in one night. We haven't managed that in the entire past week. The weapon functioned as designed, sir. Webb looked at the scorched filter Eli was in the process of unscrewing. How many rounds? 7, sir. 4 kills with 7 rounds. And the filter? Still functional. I estimate another 40 rounds before replacement needed. Webb nodded slowly. German sniper activity has been concentrated in that sector. Intelligence thinks their specialist operates from there. If you can get him, we might break their hold. I'll need more nights, sir. Establish pattern. Make them predictable. You have as long as you need. Just bring results. Night. 2. November. 19. Eli changed position. Same corridor, different angle. The Germans would find their dead. Would realize something was hunting them. Would become cautious. Caution made men predictable. At 03:15, a single German came through, moving carefully, aware something was wrong. Eli let him pass. One target wasn't worth revealing position. At 0406 Germans appeared, moving in a group, safety in numbers. They'd learned solo movement was dangerous without knowing why. 6 targets. Eli had never engaged multiple enemies simultaneously, but they were bunched up, offering concentration he might never see again. He took the trailing man. The rifle breathed death. The German fell silently. His companions kept walking, not noticing in the dark. Eli chambered around, took the second from last. Another whisper. Another body. Now they noticed. Turned. Saw 2 friends down. Didn't understand. No shots. No visible threat. They panicked, scattered, ran for the trees. Eli worked methodically. Point, fire, chamber, point, fire, chamber. The Springfield became extension of will. The oil filter turned violence into conversation. 6 bodies when the shooting stopped. His magazine empty. Shoulder aching from recoil. The filter glowing faintly in darkness, hot enough to scorch wood. He reloaded. Waited. Nobody came to investigate because nobody had heard anything worth investigating. At 0530, he saw the professional again. Older than the others, moving with the precision of someone who'd survived long enough to learn lessons. Scanning the forest, understanding something was wrong. This might be the sniper. Eli tracked him, 90 yards, edge of effective range with reduced velocity. The German knelt, examined the ground-studded footprints. Smart, dangerous, the kind of man who would eventually figure out someone was hunting from concealment. Eli aimed for center mass, squeezed. Death arrived on muffled wings. The German jerked, Fell. Got back up. The round had hit, but hadn't killed. Body armor or grazing hit. The German ran, wounded but mobile, disappeared into trees before Eli could fire again. 7 bodies. 1 wounded escape. The Germans would find 7 dead and 1 survivor with stories about silent death. Stories that sounded like madness but had bodies to prove them. Colonel Webb intercepted him at breakfast. Intelligence intercepted German communications. They're calling it der Ölgeist, the oil ghost. They think you're some kind of demon. Eli sipped coffee. Good. Fear is a weapon. 11 kills in 2 nights. You've done more damage in 48 hours than we managed in 2 weeks. Night 3, November 20. Word spread through the American camp. Not officially. Soldiers talk. The motor pool guys knew Eli was doing something, taking his rifle out at night, coming back with empty magazines and burnt filters. They didn't know details, but they knew results. German casualties spiking. American casualties in Sector Baker 0. Owen pulled Eli aside after evening meal. Let me come with you. No. Eli, I can help. I'm infantry trained. That's why you stay here. You're going home, Owen. Medical board reviews evacuations next week. Your ear damage qualifies you for stateside duty. Owen's face hardened. I'm not leaving while you're alone out there. Yes, you are. Because I promised your mother. Home means West Virginia, not a grave. I didn't ask for special treatment. I don't care. Eli's voice was firm. I made a promise and I'm keeping it. You stay in camp. Stay safe. Let me finish this. Owen gripped his shoulder. Don't get killed being a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm a mechanic keeping his word. That night, Eli took position covering 3 possible corridors. Harder, but offering more opportunities. Set up at O100. At O, 304 men appeared. Not regular soldiers. These moved differently, coordinated, using hand signals. Professional. Counter-snipers. The Germans had sent specialists to find the oil ghost. 4 hunters hunting the hunter. Eli watched them sweep the area where he'd operated previously, setting up observation posts, preparing to wait for him to reveal himself. They'd almost outsmarted him. If he'd used the same position, they'd have him. But he'd moved. He took the spotter first, the man with binoculars watching for muzzle flash. The rifle spoke in hushed tones. The spotter dropped. His team reacted instantly. Professional training, dropped into cover, scanned for threats. But there was nothing to see. No flash, no smoke, just their spotter down and impossible silence. Eli shifted aim, took the second man. Silent thunder claimed another. The remaining 2 were frantically searching now. One got smart, started firing blindly toward Eli's general direction, suppressing by volume. Bullets snapped through branches overhead. Close, too close. Eli stayed calm, tracked the muzzle flash, aimed, fired. The German stopped firing, stopped moving, stopped being a problem. The last one ran. Tactical withdrawal. Smart. Eli tracked him, but held fire. Let him go. Let him report that something impossible was happening. Let the fear spread. 14 total kills over 3 nights. The filter was dying, barely functional cotton completely burned. But tomorrow everything would change. Because the Germans were sending their best. A man named Klaus Richter. Night 4, November the 21. The duel. Intelligence arrived at 0800. Corporal carrying documents marked classified. They're sending someone, Colonel Webb said. Hauptmann Klaus Richter, counter-sniper specialist. 67 confirmed kills on the Eastern Front. Eli studied the intercepted communications. When does he arrive? Already here. Came in last night. He's in the forest now. This isn't some conscript. Webb continued. This is one of their best. He's killed more men than you've fired rounds. Then I'll have to be better, sir. You'll have to be lucky. Eli thought about Callum in the mine, about luck being preparation meeting circumstance. I don't trust luck, sir. I trust preparation. At 0400, Eli was in position. New hide, 600 yards from German lines. The forest felt different, dangerous. His spine said something was wrong. At 0420, a German soldier appeared, young, nervous, paused at a junction, lit a cigarette, routine shot, 70 yards. Eli had made this shot 40 times. He squeezed. The rifle whispered. The soldier fell. But something was wrong. The feeling intensified. You're being watched. Eli started to move. The bullet hit the tree 6 inches from his head. Bark exploded. Splinters cut his face. The Mauser's crack arrived a half-second later. He rolled, put the tree between himself and the shooter, heart hammering. 3 nights of being the hunter, and now violently he was hunted. Another shot. Closer. The German had seen his movement, was tracking him. Eli low crawled, fast, 20 feet to the next tree. Bullets tracked him. 3 shots. 4. Precise. Controlled. Professional. Silence. The German had stopped firing, was relocating, following doctrine. Shoot. Move. Shoot. This had to be Richter. 40 minutes of absolute stillness. Neither man moving, both waiting for the other to make a mistake. Eli chose movement, crawled backward through mud, inches at a time, making no sound. 50 yards. 100. Far enough that triangulation was useless. Found new cover. A fallen log. Settled in to wait. At 0500 he saw him. Just a shadow, moving between trees with fluid precision. Richter was hunting the area where Eli had been. Eli tracked him through the scope. 200 yards. Edge of effective range. The shot was possible but not guaranteed. Miss and he'd reveal position. He aimed, started to squeeze. Richter dropped flat a half-second before Eli fired, like he'd sensed it, like some sixth sense screamed danger. The bullet passed through empty air. Richter rolled, came up firing, aimed at Eli's residual muzzle smoke. 3 rounds, fast, accurate. Eli rolled left. The Mauser rounds hit the log. He kept rolling, put distance between himself and last position. This was bad. Richter had experience and instinct and 3 years of killing men who thought they were good enough. Dawn was coming. 20 minutes. Darkness was Eli's advantage. Daylight would level the field. He needed to end this now. Eli remembered something Callum taught. About fixing engines. Sometimes the solution isn't fixing what's broken. Sometimes it's making your enemy think something's broken when it isn't. He took off his helmet, found a stick, wrapped his scarf around it, created a shape that in poor light might look like a head. Old trick. Every soldier knew it. But knowing a trick exists doesn't mean you can resist when survival instinct takes over. He positioned the decoy, raised it slowly, just enough to break the skyline. The Mauser cracked. The helmet jerked. The round punched through with the sound of metal on metal. Eli marked the muzzle flash. 300 yards, northwest, behind pines. He aimed not at where the flash had been, at where the German would move after firing. Right and down. Standard doctrine. Waited. 5 seconds. 10. Movement. Shadow. Richter relocating exactly where predicted. Eli fired. 280 yards. Long shot with reduced velocity. He'd aimed high to compensate for drop. The German jerked, spun, fell, hit. Eli worked the bolt, scanned through scope. Richter was down but moving, crawling. The round had hit but hadn't killed. Body armor or grazing wound. Richter made it to cover. Disappeared. This could continue for hours. Both men wounded, both stubborn. But Eli had something Richter didn't. A promise to keep. A friend counting on him. A wife waiting at home. A child he'd never met. He did something stupid. Stood up. Walked toward Richter's position. Not running, not charging. Just walking. Rifle ready. Making himself a target. Richter took the bait. Rose from cover. Brought his Mauser up. 2 professionals. 50 yards apart. Dawn breaking. About to find out who was faster. Eli fired first. Richter fired simultaneously. Both rounds found targets. Richter's shot hit Eli in the shoulder. Punched through muscle. Spun him. Pain like fire. Eli's shot hit Richter's center mass. No armor at this range could stop 30-06. The German fell. Didn't move. Eli staggered. Sat down hard. His shoulder was bleeding. Not arterial, not fatal, but bad. Shock was coming. He looked at Richter's body. Should check it. Should confirm. Instead, he stumbled toward American lines. Each step harder. The rifle weighed 100 pounds. The oil filter still smoking. He made it 200 yards before his legs gave out. Sergeant Victor Romano's patrol found him at dawn, unconscious in mud, bleeding from the shoulder, clutching his rifle. Romano checked the wound. Through and through. Clean. Lucky. Got him on a stretcher. Got him moving. Colonel Webb met them at the motor pool. What happened? Romano looked at the rifle, at the scorched filter, at blood and mud. Found him 200 yards out. Wounded. Looks like you mixed it up with someone. The German sniper. Don't know yet, sir. Webb looked at Eli. Get him to medical. And someone check the area. If there's a body, I want it confirmed. Field hospital. Eli woke to white canvas and antiseptic smell and pain in his right side. The medic was a captain. 40. Experienced. You're lucky, Sergeant. Through and through. Missed bone. Missed major vessels. You'll have a scar, but you'll keep the arm. The German. They found him. Dead. 300 yards from where we found you. Hauptmann Klaus Richter. Counter-sniper specialist. 68 confirmed kills before you made it 69. Eli closed his eyes. relief and exhaustion, and emptiness that comes after killing a man doing his job same as you. Colonel Webb wants to see you. Tell him I'll be there in an hour. You'll be here 3 days minimum. Can't. Job's not done. Sergeant, you killed their best shooter. You've accounted for 41 deaths in 4 nights. Not enough. Not until Owen's on a ship home. Night 5, November the 22. Owen's wound. They told Eli to stay in bed. Told him the wound needed rest. Told him infection was real and moving was stupid. He went hunting anyway, the arm in a sling, bandages tight. Pain managed by whatever they'd given him that made the world fuzzy but didn't stop him seeing through a scope. Owen found him at the motor pool at 0100. You're supposed to be in hospital. Job's not finished. Eli, you got shot. I need 4 more nights. Medical board reviews your case on the 27th. I need you alive until then. Let me come with you. No. Eli's voice was final. I need you here. Safe. They stared at each other. Brothers in everything but blood. Owen broke first. If you die out there, I'm telling Nora you were too stubborn. Tell her from West Virginia, not from a telegram office. At 04:15:6, Germans came through the corridor, moving tight, scared. You could see it in their body language. Eli took them methodically. 1, 2, 3. The Springfield whispered its deadly count. 4, 5, 6. When it was over, 6 bodies lay in the corridor. His shoulder was screaming, bandages seeping red. He'd torn something. Didn't matter. The job was done for tonight. He crawled back, made it halfway before the world started spinning. 3/4 before vision tunneled, all the way before he collapsed. The patrol found him at 0600, unconscious, bleeding, rifle clutched in his good hand. Romano looked at the medic. How is he even walking? Stubbornness or insanity? Probably both. The captain took one look at the reopened wound. 3 days, I told you. Job's not done. The job is going to kill you. Eli looked at the canvas ceiling. Better that than living knowing I broke my word. Night 6, November 23rd, the final hunt. The hospital discharged him on the 23rd, not because he was healed, because Webb signed an order saying Sergeant Brennan was needed for essential duties. Eli reported to Webb's office at 1400. You look like hell, Sergeant. Feel worse, sir. Medical says you're at 50%. Good thing I'm not doing combat. Just shooting. Webb slid a folder across. Intelligence summary. German casualties in our sector 76 confirmed through body recovery. Actual count estimated at 94 when including wounded who died later and bodies not yet recovered. 94, sir. Captured German documents confirm it. Their casualty reports show additional wounded died of wounds matching your operational timeline. Eli absorbed that. 94 men. 94 sons and brothers and fathers who wouldn't go home because a mechanic from West Virginia had built something from garbage. The Germans are requesting permission to withdraw. Webb continued. Morale is shattered. They think we have supernatural weapons. We do, sir. Innovation. It's called a mechanic who won't quit. Webb leaned back. You've done more than enough. You've broken their hold. You can stop now. Not until Owen ships out. That's tomorrow. Medical board approved his evacuation. He leaves at 0800. Relief. Pure and simple. 1 more night. 1 more hunt. Then Owen would be safe. 1 more night, sir. Then I'm done. All right. But Brennan, if you get killed tonight, I'm writing your wife that you died being unnecessarily heroic. Tell her I died keeping my word. She'll understand. At 0200, Eli took position for the last time. Same corridor, last oil filter. After tonight, he'd bury it with the others. At 0300, 12 Germans came through. Not soldiers, command staff, officers, relocating headquarters because staying in one place meant death. 12 men, the largest group, most dangerous. Eli took them methodically. 1, the rifle whispered. 2, a mechanical sigh. 3, silent thunder. By the 4th, they broke. Ran, abandoned discipline for survival. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The Springfield cycled. Brass ejected. Death arrived quiet. 9, 10, 11. The last man fell 50 yards from German lines, 50 yards from safety, close enough to see it. 12 bodies, 18 kills for the night, 94 total. The oil filter failed on the next shot. Not catastrophically, just stopped working. Cotton gone. Baffles destroyed. Eli unscrewed it. Let it fall. Hot metal hitting cold mud with a hiss. He packed his rifle. Started the long crawl back. The shoulder was agony. Fever rising. Vision blurring. Didn't matter. Owen shipped out in 6 hours. The promise was kept. Dawn, November the 23rd. Owen found Eli by the motor pool at 0700, 30 minutes before transport. Eli was asleep on a crate, rifle across lap, oil filter in trash, looking 10 years older. Owen sat beside him. Didn't wake him, just sat in the dawn thinking about promises and friendship. Eli woke at 07:15, saw Owen, smiled despite pain. "You're still here. 30 more minutes." Owen paused. "Thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your word. For doing something impossible." Eli stood, winced. "I made a promise to your mother. Brennan men keep promises." They walked to the transport. Other wounded loading. Men going home. Owen stopped at the tailgate. "When I get home, I'm naming my first son after you. So everyone knows. Don't name him after himself." Too late. Already decided. Owen climbed in. "Eli Hartley. Has a good sound." The truck started, pulled away. Owen waved. Eli waved back. Watched the truck disappear toward the rear, toward safety, toward America, toward the life Eli had promised he'd live. Colonel Webb appeared. "You did it. You kept your word." "Yes, sir." At considerable cost. Eli thought about Maeve's porch, about promises made and kept. Was it worth it? "Yes, sir. It was worth it." Headquarters, November the 24th. The formal debriefing happened with 3 intelligence officers taking notes. They wanted details, methodology, everything documented. Eli walked them through it. Oil filter selection, welding technique, cotton compression, effective range, sound reduction. 6 nights. 94 confirmed kills verified through German documents. 94, one officer repeated. In 6 nights. Average 15.6 per night. Math checks out, sir. Efficiency is remarkable. 94 kills with approximately 300 rounds. 31% hit rate. Ambush conditions, sir. Close range. Targets not expecting contact. Still remarkable. The officer made notes. The suppressor worked as designed. Better than designed. Flash reduction, 89%. Sound reduction, 73%. Extended operational security significantly, but not sustainable. 6 filters in 6 nights. 35 cents per filter, Eli said. Times 6. $2.10 total. Compare that to experimental suppressors costing $127. The room went quiet. Nobody had done that math. Webb leaned forward. "Gentlemen, Sergeant Brennan has demonstrated that innovation comes from necessity and soldiers understand problems better than engineers in laboratories." One officer spoke. "Colonel, we can't officially sanction unauthorized weapons modification. I'm not asking you to sanction it. I'm asking you to study it. Learn from it." "What about Sergeant Brennan?" Webb pulled out a folder. "I'm putting a notation in his file. Exceptional initiative and technical innovation under combat conditions." He looked at Eli. "That's as far as I can go officially. Unofficially, you saved at least 50 American lives." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. Medical wants you evacuated. That shoulder needs surgery. When do I leave tomorrow?" "Same rotation as Hartley, 1 day behind." December 1944. Captured documents. Intelligence brought Webb documents on December 5th, captured from German command during withdrawal. Among casualty reports was a memo from Hauptmann Ernst Weber. Webb read it aloud to Eli. November 18 through 23. Unidentified American sniper. 94 confirmed casualties. No muzzle flash detected. No acoustic signature reported. Losses concentrated in Supply Corridor 3. Morale collapse in 2nd and 3rd companies. Recommend immediate sector withdrawal. If der Earlgeist encountered in future operations, advise tactical retreat rather than engagement. This enemy cannot be fought by conventional means. Der Earlgeist, Eli repeated. The oil ghost. They were terrified, Webb said. Thought you were supernatural. I'm just a mechanic who made a promise. You're proof that Americans adapt faster than enemies respond. That innovation wins wars. Webb pulled out another document. Aberdeen Proving Ground tested your technique. Results match your field data. 89% flash reduction. 73% sound reduction. Filter lifespan 45 to 55 rounds. So it works. It works. But too unreliable for standardization. They're using your data to develop purpose-built suppressors. Eli thought about that. His improvised solution becoming foundation for engineered systems. That's good, sir. Better they build something proper. The point is you proved the concept, showed it was possible. Webb closed the folder. Sometimes that's more important than perfect execution. May 1945. War's end. The war in Europe ended on May 8th. Victory, celebrations, the Third Reich defeated. Eli was in a rear motor pool when news came. Back to regular duties, fixing engines, changing oil. His shoulder had healed, left him with limited range of motion and a scar. The doctors said he was lucky. The letter from Nora arrived May 10th. Dearest Eli, the war is over. Come home. Margaret was born December 28th. She has your eyes and stubborn chin. She's waiting to meet her father. I'm waiting for my husband. Come home safe. All my love, Nora. December 28th. He'd missed it. Missed his daughter's birth by 5 months. Been in Germany while his wife gave birth alone. But he'd kept the other promise. Owen was home. Safe. Alive. Maeve had her son. One promise kept balanced, one broken. That's how Eli chose to see it. June 1945. Homecoming. The transport docked in New York June 3rd. Thousands of soldiers going home. Eli took a train to West Virginia. Arrived Charleston June 7th. Nora was on the porch, holding a 6-month-old baby with dark hair and eyes that watched everything with solemn intensity. Eli climbed the steps, dropped his duffel, looked at his daughter for the first time. Margaret stared back. This stranger in uniform, this man who was supposed to be important, but was just confusing. She's beautiful, Eli said, voice catching. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Nora pulled him close. You're here now. That's what matters. Inside, Eli held Margaret, felt her weight, felt her warmth, felt the future instead of death. She grabbed his finger, held tight. Welcome home, Nora whispered. Home. The word felt foreign, but he was here. He'd survived. He'd kept his promises. That would have to be enough. Spring, 1946. Owen's visit. Owen came to visit in April, limping slightly from the wound, but healthy, whole, alive. They sat on Eli's porch drinking beer while Margaret chased fireflies. I got married, Owen said. We're expecting. Congratulations. Going to name him Eli. Owen looked at his friend. Eli Hartley. So everyone knows who saved me, who kept his promise. You don't have to. Yeah, I do. Because that boy will grow up hearing about his namesake, about a man who built something impossible, who broke rules to save lives, who kept his word no matter what it cost. That's a lot of weight. It's the right kind of weight. Teaches you integrity matters. Promises matter. They raised their bottles to promises kept, to promises kept. 1988. The end. Elias Brennan died in his sleep on a cold morning in March. 74 years old. Heart attack. Quick. Painless. He'd run the garage until he was 70. Fixed engines. Taught his daughter. Taught his grandchildren. Passed on the lessons Callum taught him. The funeral was small. Family. Friends. Veterans. The preacher talked about service and sacrifice. In the garage, Margaret found a trunk. Uniform. Letters. Photographs. And at the bottom, wrapped in an oily rag, a threaded steel ring. Precision work. She didn't know what it was. Threw it away. But the story survived. In military history, in engineering journals, in tales soldiers told. The Hürtgen Forest. November 1944. 94 Germans killed by a mechanic who built a suppressor from a 35-cent oil filter. They called him Der Ölgeist, the oil ghost, a demon who killed without sound. But he was just a man, an American man, who understood that the greatest weapon isn't issued by the army. It's built by stubborn mechanics who refuse to accept that anything is impossible. Elias Brennan kept his promises, all of them, at whatever cost. And in the end, that's all that matters. Fort Benning Museum. Present day. In a corner of the small arms exhibit, there's a photograph. Black and white, grainy. 1944. A sergeant holds a Springfield, something cylindrical on the barrel. Oil filter. Crude. Improvised. Effective. The man looks tired, looks older than 30, looks like he's seen things that aged him. Caption reads, Field Improvisation. Hürtgen Forest. November 1944. 94 confirmed. Der Ölgeist. No name. Per the subject's request. Visitors pass without stopping, without understanding. But in Charleston, West Virginia, there's a garage. Different owners, different name. Same building where Callum taught his son that bad equipment kills and good equipment saves lives. Late at night, mechanics remember the stories about a man who fixed the unfixable, built the unbuildable, kept promises no one thought possible, and they try harder, weld stronger, refuse to quit longer, because that's what Brennan men did. They kept their promises. And sometimes on cold November nights you can hear the ghost. Not supernatural, just memory. The memory of a 35-cent oil filter doing what the army said was impossible, making death quiet, making killing mechanical, making promises kept. Der Ölgeist, the motor oil ghost, still hunting the Hurtgen, still keeping his word. Some ghosts don't rest, they just reload and whisper.